Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this evening with Esther McIntosh. I'm just going to let one more person in. Right. So introducing Esther. So delighted to have you with us this evening, Esther. So for those of you who don't know Esther, Esther is the director of the Centre of Religion in Society and professor of feminist theology and ethics at York St John University, UK. Her teaching and research is interdisciplinary, informed by concepts of personhood and community, with a focus on issues of social justice, especially gender justice. She has published feminist works in philosophy and theology on the concepts of God, self-sacrifice, forgiveness, trauma, the problem of evil, gender and sexuality, community and digital media, church-state relations, populism, trans inclusion, and theological silence as complicity in the oppression of Palestinians. That's quite a lot, isn't it? What an amazing woman. Esther has been a member of the Global Network for Public Theology since its inception and currently serves as its European representative. She is on the editorial board of the Political and Public Theologies book series published by Brill. A long-standing trade unionist, she organises workplace actions in solidarity with Palestine and lobbies academic theologians to speak up for Palestinian liberation. And she's also a trustee of Sabeel-Kairos UK. So as you can all see, this is an amazing woman. And Esther, we are absolutely delighted to have you with us this evening. So you've got around 45 minutes, a bit longer if you need it, to share with us. And then after that, we'll have a question and answer time. Please do feel free to put your questions into the chat, and I will try and kind of man that as the evening progresses. And Esther, thank you. We're really looking forward to hearing from you now.
Thank you so much, Claire. Can I ask you to share my slides, please?
Yes, I will do that right away. Can I check that everyone is able to see the slides? Brilliant. I just need to be able to move those slides on. So one moment, please, Esther. I wonder if I can do it from this screen. Okay, right. We're ready. Go for it, Esther.
Thank you. So thank you so much for that introduction, Claire, and for this chance to share. So and apologies for my croaky voice. I've got a bit of a virus at the moment. From the 1st to the 10th of June this year, I was in the West Bank on a solidarity and advocacy visit organised by FOSNA, the Friends of Sabeel in North America, and Sabeel, the Palestinian Liberation Theology Centre in occupied East Jerusalem. In total, there were 15 of us on this delegation, mostly North American, one from Canada, one from Guatemala, one from Peru, and 2 of us from the UK. So Sabeel is the only civil organisation that is still bringing international delegations to Palestine, or was after October 2023. Their director, Omar Harami, states that we need these delegations more than ever to reduce violence towards Palestinians and to bear witness to their oppression. Their motto is "Come and see, go and tell." So I'm here to share with you reflections and experiences from this recent visit and from the people we met and the places we saw. We flew into Jordan and entered the West Bank through the King Hussein or Allenby Bridge crossing. This is the only route that Palestinians can take. Now, obviously, we couldn't take any photos at this point, but I can tell you it's a chaotic experience. Members of our group who'd visited before said it's different every time. We queued from one desk to another, then back to the first desk. Passports were passed backwards and forwards, photos were taken. This is where we first encountered the notion that for Palestinians, existence is resistance, and it became a recurring refrain through our visit. We met an American Palestinian woman attempting the bridge crossing who told us she's determined to make the effort to do this journey every year. The crossing is clearly designed to be difficult and stressful for Palestinians. It takes at least 3 hours, sometimes 8 hours, without water or toilets, and you're only travelling a few kilometres. We arrived on the West Bank side, and when we got there, it was even more chaotic. The Israeli border control was shouting at everyone, sending us backwards and forwards through crowds of people, while parents tried to hang on to their children. Israeli officers searching their luggage were ripping open packets and throwing Palestinian families' belongings around while they tried to gather them up. Eventually, after being questioned, Israeli visas are given out. As you can see in this picture, these are not stamped in your passport, but these are little slips of paper, which you now need to show every time you go through a checkpoint. If you lose this little slip of paper, you could be arrested. God. On our return, after being given the exit visa, another little slip of paper, the pink one this time, we weren't allowed to leave the building and board a bus back across the bridge until we'd paid an exit fee. This was new. Even members of our group, who'd been as recently as February, just 4 months earlier, hadn't had to pay this exit fee. And it wasn't cheap. It was about £50 in British money. They wouldn't accept my bank card, and there's no ATM in the building. If I hadn't been with a colleague who had a credit card, I would have been stuck in that building, not allowed in or out. I don't know what happens to Palestinians who reach there and can't pay. Next slide, please, Claire. Thank you. So the next time we encountered the notion that existence is resistance was later that evening at the educational bookshop. You may remember that this bookshop was raided in January and the owners were arrested. We met one of the owners, Ahmad Muna, and he told us what had happened. There are 2 shops opposite each other in occupied East Jerusalem, and they were raided at the same time. The IDF came in, confiscated the owners' phones, and accused them of selling books that incite hate. They started pulling books off the shelves and tossing them on the ground. The Hebrew-speaking soldiers couldn't read the English and Arabic books, so they were entering the titles into Google Translate to try and find anything seditious. At one point, picking up a copy of Orwell's 1984 and claiming it was a book about 1948. And then picking up a copy of the Haaretz newspaper, an Israeli newspaper, and claiming it was Hamas. With no success, they gave up on titles and started examining children's picture books, discussing every image on every page before tossing them on the floor. They went down to the storeroom and came out with a children's colouring book called From the River to the Sea. They debated whether the drawing outlines of Al-Aqsa and other sites were inciting hate, eventually tossing this book on the floor too. It landed with its back cover facing up, in the middle of which was a small Palestinian flag. At this point, they arrested Ahmad and took him away for interrogation, leaving the shop open, books all over the floor. His uncle had been in the stationery shop opposite, and he too was arrested and taken away. For 2 days, Ahmad was interrogated. They wouldn't give him water or a blanket. It was January, it was cold. He couldn't contact anyone because they had his phone. So he didn't know what was happening with the shop, and they didn't know where he was, and he didn't know where his uncle was. He later found out his uncle had been taken to one of the notorious prisons, stripped and beaten. After 2 days, suddenly something changed for Ahmad. The officers offered him food and then released him. When he got his phone back, he saw that the international educational community had been condemning the raid and calling for his release. He told us that the shop has stayed open because existence is resistance. He also stressed the importance of international voices in speaking out and keeping them alive. Thanks, Claire. So you might have heard of Silwan. This is an area where Palestinian homes face forced demolition. The Israeli government is sending bulldozers to demolish these homes and make thousands of Palestinians homeless, because it claims this is the site of the Garden of King David in the Bible, which it plans to recreate here. The Eyewitness Silwan project is an example of art as resistance. On the left is a demolished medical centre and home to 6 families that's painted with murals. And on the right, you can see the pictures I took of the eyes painted on the buildings. Eyes of community members and human rights activists such as Rachel Corrie, and those facing human rights abuses such as George Floyd. The eyes say, we see you and you should see us too. Living here, existing here is an act of resistance. The morning after we visited, bulldozers arrived and 3 homes were demolished, making 3 more Palestinian families homeless. Thanks, Claire. We heard the news of those demolitions while we were on our way to Ida refugee camp. This is 2 kilometres north of Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank. You might be familiar with the picture there of the giant key that stands at the entrance to the camp. The camp was established in 1950, so 3 generations have now been born and raised in this camp. Refugees until their right to return to their villages and towns is respected. As you can see from the picture on the bottom left, the camp is overcrowded, 0.07 kilometres square for 6,000 people. There is a lack of privacy and a lack of water. The separation wall in the top right picture there comes right inside the camp. And from that watchtower, the IDF look directly into people's homes. Boys in the camp have been shot and killed or injured from that watchtower and from IDF raids. There are more than 60 Palestinian refugee camps, 19 in the West Bank and 8 in Gaza, the others in surrounding countries, Lebanon, Syria and Jordan. Most of the camps were established after the 1948 Nakba, with more established after the 1967 Nakba. A third of Palestinians live in refugee camps. UNRWA was created in 1949 to provide relief to Palestinian refugees. In the camps, schools and medical centres are provided by UNRWA. But Israel plans to ban UNRWA. If this happens, UNRWA employees will be out of work, children will be deprived of an education, and families will be deprived of healthcare. The UNRWA schools in the occupied East Jerusalem have already been forcibly closed by Israeli forces. At Ida Camp, we met Rayan Abusor, who works for Al Rawad Cultural and Arts Society. She told us that every action of a Palestinian is an act of resistance. Living, staying, learning, maintaining the culture and the land. Al Rawad provides 8 programs in cultural arts and education, including the only public library in the Ida camp, because existence is resistance and education is resistance. Thanks, Claire. Al-Makrua is an area of Palestinian land in a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So in the picture in the top right, you can see the Roman terraces of this area. It's located between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. There are apricot, fig and olive trees here owned by the Kasia family, locked behind a fence in the picture on the left. We met Alice Kasia here and she told us that in 2019, Israeli forces demolished their restaurant for the 4th time and then also demolished their family home and damaged their fruit trees. For 5 years, the family slept in tents here until the Israeli government declared this a military zone and issued military orders in an attempt to prevent the Kasias from accessing their own land. While settlers violently attacked the family, destroyed Christian icons and occupied the land. So the 2 pictures in the middle there are from the Save Al-Makrua Instagram. Alice Kasia and her family have been fighting a legal battle to ban settlers from their land. They've managed to prove their ownership of the land from archival documents, simultaneously proving that ownership documents the settlers produced were forgeries connected with the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, which is a registered charity in many countries, but supporting the building of illegal settlements. It has been an expensive legal battle for the Kasias that isn't over yet, and even some lawyers have double-crossed them. Alice and her mother were attacked whilst they were in their car, but they were then arrested and charged with running over a soldier, which they didn't do. They have been acquitted of this false charge, but the Israeli authorities are attempting to bring the charge again. The Kasia family work hard to build interfaith solidarity in the area, but solidarity tents and interfaith camps they've set up have been destroyed. They're nervous about rebuilding their restaurant and their home in case they are attacked by settlers again. But if they don't farm the land, the Israeli government will claim it is abandoned and take it from them. They are determined to stay on the land to exist and resist being pushed out by illegal settlers or by the Israeli government. The day after we visited, they broke through the change, unlocked the gates, and accessed their land. This picture in the bottom right was sent to us. Through grassroots resistance, they have successfully expelled settlers from 5 illegal outposts on their land. Thanks, Claire. The Tent of Nations is a large 42-hectare hilltop farm south of Bethlehem, with evidence of ownership by the Nasser family since 1916. But the farm is now surrounded by 5 expanding settlements. As we arrived on the farm, we were stopped by a new roadblock created by settlers, a pile of rocks, earth, and rubbish with no way through. You can see the picture of this from our van window in the bottom left there. We had to get out and walk. We met Oud Nasser at the farm, in a cave pictured here in the middle. This mural is painted by children. They run summer camps here for children from the refugee camps. He told us of the repeated attacks by settlers and intimidation by Israeli soldiers. Tens of thousands of olive, grape, and apple trees have been destroyed by masked men just before harvest. And now, with settlements expanding and adding new roadblocks, it's becoming more and more difficult to drive fruit to market. It won't be long, Dawood thinks, before they'll need an olive press here to make olive oil on the site, because truckloads of olives won't be able to be driven down. The settlements are disconnecting and isolating Temple of Nations physically and socially from other Palestinian families and farms. The Nasser family have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal battles to prove their ownership and stop the settlements and the demolition orders, fighting unjust laws that are stacked against them. The Nasser family are prevented from having running water, mains electricity, or even building on the land. And yet you can see in the pictures on the right, these settlements coming right up to their fence, and settlement roads being built right up to their farm with street lights. The settlers have buildings, electricity, and water. Some of these settlement buildings, he told us, have been filled with Ukrainian refugees. Even Russia's war with Ukraine has been used to further oppress Palestinians. The Nasser family's motto is that they refuse to be enemies. Daoud tells us they're not crying, they refuse to hate, they refuse to be victims. And they're not leaving. They believe justice will come, even though it's taking a long time. He tells us they are peacemakers, not peace talkers. They believe in non-violent resistance, and yet they are still subjected to violence. They engage in active, not passive resistance. Existing here requires creative resistance. They're not allowed to build on their land, so they dig caves instead. They're not allowed electricity, so they have installed solar panels and made their own. They're not allowed running water, so they've built rainwater collection and filtration systems. There are thousands of trees here, almond, grape, fig, and olive, that they water by hand with 2 cups of water a day. They welcome international volunteers here to help maintain the farm, planting, weeding, and harvesting. Finding a way to exist here is hard and getting harder. Existing means resisting every attempt to drive them out. They are a beacon on the hill, protecting the smaller Palestinian farms around. Thanks, Claire. Hebron is one of the most beleaguered cities in the south of the occupied West Bank. The Tomb of the Patriarchs is located here, believed to be the burial site of the biblical figures Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah, and also the site of the Ibrahimi Mosque. Palestinians are doubly caged here, fenced in by Israeli authorities and having to build higher fences to protect themselves from settlers who spit and swear at them and their children. The two pictures on the left are of a Palestinian school. Palestinian shops have been forcibly closed by Israeli soldiers, and this once bustling marketplace is deserted. Israeli flags mark the buildings where settlers have moved into and taken over Palestinian homes, as you can see in these middle pictures here. We had to pass through and have permission from Israeli police and soldiers to even walk down this street. Settlers are paid to live here, while Israeli news reports that Holocaust survivors are living in poverty. Human rights activist Issa Amro lives here, as you can see in the top right picture. Before we visited, in May 2025, the BBC broadcast Louis Theroux's documentary, The Settlers. As retaliation for his part in the documentary, a fire was set on Issa's property at 4 in the morning, and this picture here on the bottom right shows. Issa told us he woke up smelling smoke. He has bulletproof windows and doors to protect himself. He's surrounded on all sides by illegal settlements and Israeli soldiers. No ambulance can reach him. There is no one to protect him. He cannot leave the house unattended for fear of attacks. Mass soldiers broke into his house, stole his Black Lives Matter flag and burnt it, and they mocked his brother who died in 2023. But if Issa tries to defend himself or files a complaint, he is the one who gets arrested. Palestinian residents here are not allowed to have their extended family from outside of Hebron visit them for Eid. While we sat talking, drinking sage tea and Arabic coffee with cardamom, soldiers came up to the door to watch and intimidate. From 2001 to 2006, this house was taken over by the IDF and used as a military base. Then in 2007, settlers moved in. Issa helped to reclaim the house by renting it from its Palestinian owner. Issa documents human rights abuses and exercises creative, non-violent resistance. When the IDF only allows Palestinians here a few hours to access their land and harvest olives, Issa organises and brings as many people as possible to the harvest. He's turning his home into a community hub. Since October 2023, he has built kitchens and a cinema here, smuggling in building materials and children's toys. He's building community support and solidarity to help Palestinians stay on their land and not be forced out. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He told us that existence is resistance, but that his existence is precarious and depends upon international support. Thanks, Claire. In Beit Jiza, northwest of Jerusalem, a similarly extreme story of threats to home and land and existence was shared with us at the Garib family home. This family home, pictured on the left, is surrounded by illegal settlers. Access to the family home is controlled by a yellow military gate at the bottom of the drive and an orange settler gate to the side of the drive. The Palestinian family who own and live in this house are also doubly caged, having to build high fences and screens to protect themselves from armed settlers who strip naked to frighten the children and who threaten to shoot the children in the head. Some of the family members are scared to go outside. The 12-year-old boy living here has previously been arrested, interrogated, and imprisoned for playing football in his own garden. When the ball went over the fence, the settlers called the army. The family have been attacked and arrested many times. In 2002, they were arrested while a section of the separation wall was built, cutting off access to their farmland. Then in 2008, the military and settler gates were added, controlling access to their drive. The army and the settlers have the keys to these gates and can access this Palestinian home at any time, but the family who live here do not have the keys to these gates. They needed permission from the IDF for us to visit. In some countries, prisoners have more visitors' rights than this family. Since October 2023, opening of the gates has become even more restricted. On some days, the children can't get out to school. Even when an ambulance was needed for a sick relative, it was stuck outside the gate. The family had to break the gate to get a stretcher in, and the family was charged for the repair to the locks. The family are physically and mentally exhausted and very alone here, but they refuse to leave. They assert their right to their land and their home. They tell us that they don't need security because they are on the right side of justice, while 3,000 settlers in this area are insecure and have the army to protect them from a caged family who just want their children to be able to play without fear. They have even been offered a blank cheque and passports to other countries if they'll leave, but they resist. Continuing to exist here is a challenge. Their access to water is intermittent. Their roof is leaking and they're not allowed to carry out repairs on their home. And they are only permitted through the wall to farm for a few hours. They desperately need to raise funds for a tractor. And not far from here is Kwalandia, the pictures on the right, where the separation wall has been built right across the main road from Jerusalem to Ramallah. Shops here are deserted because there is no longer any business. There used to be an airport in Kwalandia. This hard barrier segregation has been erected in the last 20 years, rerouting the 15-kilometre journey between Jerusalem and Ramallah for Palestinians. Previously a few minutes' drive, it now takes hours through the notorious Kwalandia checkpoint that 26,000 Palestinians pass through every day. And they can't pass through in a car. If they have West Bank ID, they can only pass through on foot. We saw people by this wall trying to find a way over to get to work. A fortnight after we returned to the UK, this story appeared in Al Jazeera, showing accounts of attempts to scale the 8-metre wall because of increased Israeli restrictions on work permits for Palestinians. In the attempts to scale this wall, several have either been shot by Israeli forces or fallen and shattered their legs. At least 35 Palestinians have died this way this year. Existing and resisting here is life-threatening. Thanks, Claire. The old city of Jerusalem is divided into 4 quarters: Jerusalem, Muslim, Christian, and Armenian. In the Armenian quarter, we met young people, 4th-generation genocide survivors, also resisting to exist. This plot of land, known as Cow's Garden, is a rare open space in Jerusalem. In 2023, the Armenian community found out that their patriarch had granted a 98-year lease to developers, which they argue was illegal. This historic land belongs to the Armenian community. In 2024, they filed a lawsuit to have the lease cancelled, and settlers came to attack them. The young Armenians built a clubhouse here and now maintain a presence on this land 24 hours a day, every day, to protect it from takeover by developers or settlers. This grassroots youth movement of non-violent direct action is supported by Armenian political parties and the diasporic community. We met someone in the clubhouse who was visiting from Newcastle in the UK to lend support here. A pre-trial hearing is due to take place in September this year. They are determined to exist and resist, to keep the religious mosaic of the old city and the presence of Armenians in Jerusalem. Thanks, Claire. Taibeh, which means good, is an ancient Christian village northeast of Ramallah, with a Melkite church, a Greek Orthodox and a Roman Catholic church. These small Christian communities come together for joint celebrations of Christmas festivals and Easter. The priests of these churches collaborate and make decisions together. But life here is difficult. Children of these families struggle to find homes and jobs here. Unusually, since 1994, this place has also been home to a Palestinian brewery. It was, in fact, the first Palestinian brewery and the first microbrewery in the whole of the Middle East. It produced its first beer in 1995. But Israeli authorities often hold up their shipments for weeks or months, and travel by land is delayed and complicated by the segregation wall and the checkpoints. Yet its beer is sold in about 17 other countries, including the UK. There's a Palestinian restaurant in Notting Hill in London that sells it. Although the labels on the bottles in America have to say product of the West Bank and are not allowed to say product of Palestine. Taipei Brewery now has facilities to bottle 5,000 beers per hour and has expanded its product range to include wine and spirits, experimenting with indigenous ingredients such as za'atar and coffee. Since 2005, it's been bringing tourists here for an Oktoberfest, and it promotes other local Palestinian products such as baked goods, olive oil, and tatrees, the Palestinian embroidery made by local women. Since our visit in June, however, existing here and resisting the occupation has been made more difficult by repeated attacks by settlers, setting fire to villagers' cars, including near to a cemetery and the archaeological ruins of the 5th century church of St. George, and spraying threatening graffiti on the walls. This headline in the bottom left here is from the 28th of July, just a few days ago, reporting more attacks on this village. Thanks, Claire. So although our solidarity and advocacy visit was to the West Bank to bear witness to the human rights abuses of apartheid occupation and settler colonialism there, Gaza was never far from our minds, nor from those we met. Palestinians were quick to remind us that however terrible things are in the West Bank, they're not as bad as they are in Gaza. This is part of the fragmentation policy of the Israeli government. Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem all have different IDs and are subjected to different rules. Since 2007, families split across Gaza and the West Bank cannot meet. If someone with a Jerusalem ID marries someone from Ramallah, they have to live in Ramallah. Jerusalem ID is only ever temporary and has to be reapplied for every 7 years, and one of the conditions is paying hefty taxes to the Israeli government, taxes from which settlers are exempt. One of our Palestinian guides told us about his brother who travelled abroad over 30 years ago. He lost his Jerusalem ID and was not allowed to return to Palestine, not even for his mother's funeral. His family haven't seen him in decades. At the Sabeel offices in occupied East Jerusalem, we met Buda Hassan, one of the authors of the December 2024 Amnesty International report on the genocide in Gaza. She told us that the physical and spatial separation of Palestinians with different identity cards and experiences also leads to mental, social, and psychological fragmentation and increases the sense of abandonment for Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. While all Palestinians are living with trauma, in Gaza there are children injured in bomb blasts who wish they'd been killed so as to not be a burden on their family. Children with additional needs have lost their cultural centres and their means of communication, and now they are starving. Children have died from lactose intolerance. Babies have died because there's no baby formula. And their families have no space to grieve, constantly displaced and searching for food, water, and shelter. The scale and the speed of destruction in Gaza has made it seem unstoppable. But she reminds us, America could have stopped it at the start with the stroke of a pen. Even since this Amnesty report came out over half a year ago, there still isn't a full arms and trade embargo on Israel. The world after Gaza will be different, she tells us. We have already failed in the face of genocide. We have to make sure we don't fail the post-genocide trauma recovery. At Bethlehem Bible College, we also met Shireen Awad. You may remember the news reports of the Israeli airstrike on the compound of the 1600-year-old Greek Orthodox Church, St. Porphyrius in Gaza City. Shireen's relatives were amongst the Palestinians sheltering there. One of her aunts thought she had survived, but later died in hospital from undiagnosed internal bleeding. There was no X-ray machine to see the bleeding. Another aunt needed hip surgery, and this had to be performed without anaesthetic. Shireen's mum gets dressed in her best clothes every night, brushes her hair, puts on perfume, and sleeps with her door open in Gaza. So if she is killed in the night, she can be found with dignity. This is her existence as resistance. Shireen is director of Shepherd Society, which provides meals, food packages and jobs in Gaza and in the West Bank. Since October 2023, their existence has become more difficult, with some donors accusing them of being Hamas and pulling their funds. And the Israeli government has blocked donated funds from reaching them. The morning we met her, she was just receiving news that the emergency department at Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza, which they had helped to rebuild after an airstrike, had been bombed yet again. Existing in Gaza is resistance. Since we returned from the West Bank, we have seen daily reports of aid seekers being killed by Israeli and American forces. And just a few days ago, two leading Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel, stated that Israel is committing genocide. B'Tselem, based on analysis of the attitude and behavior of the Israeli government, warns that this genocide will not stay in Gaza. Thanks, Claire. So where does this leave theology? Theology is in a crisis. Churches and theologians have remained largely silent while the Bible has been weaponized against Palestinians. Christian Zionism has conflated the term Israel in the Bible with the current nation state of Israel. Palestinian liberation theologians Mitri Raheb and Naim Atik, amongst others, have published multiple books and articles critiquing the ways in which the language of Exodus and chosen people and promised land has been used to oppress them in their own land, the land of Jesus' birth. Palestinian theologians are inspired by biblical passages that speak of resisting empire and seeking justice. And now a new generation of Palestinian theologians are taking a different approach. Whilst grateful for the work of their predecessors, they critique their approach for appealing to Western sources and writing for Western audiences. The younger generation is doing theology from the ground up, contextual Palestinian theology written by Palestinians for Palestinians. From the depths of their suffering, they use the olive tree as a metaphor to produce a lived theology. This work draws on sources from the global south, other contexts of colonialism where empires have fallen. Daniel Manaya, executive director of Musalaha, which means reconciliation, speaks not of coexistence, but of co-resistance. Palestinians and Israeli Jews coming together to resist the occupation and to exist in harmony with one another. His work and that of his brothers John and Samuel, as well as Gazan Palestinian Yusuf al-Khoury and Palestinian women Lama Mansour and Shadia Kubti, will all be published in this book, The Cross and the Olive Tree. It's available to pre-order now, due out in the autumn, and there are plans for a book tour, so we'll hopefully get to hear from them at that time. Thanks, Claire. And so to conclude, I just want to reflect on existence as resistance with a final note about surveillance and the threat of arrest and imprisonment. Palestinians have different colour car number plates from Israelis and are not allowed on the same roads. Israeli roads are new highways. The Palestinian roads are dusty tracks diverted through tunnels under the Israeli roads. At checkpoints, they are shouted at and humiliated and always at risk of arrest and imprisonment. More than 12,000 have been arrested in the West Bank since October 2023. They can be held indefinitely without charge. And we know they are tortured, beaten, and left cold and hungry and sexually assaulted by Israeli guards. The UN reported on this in March this year. And while we were in the West Bank, we met people who've been in prison more than once, people who've done nothing wrong, punished for existing, punished for being Palestinian. We can't share their names because they are still at risk. Palestinians are surveilled everywhere they go. Who they meet and what they say is recorded. Their water consumption is controlled by the Israeli government, making it necessary for Palestinians to store water on their roofs. On street corners and in their homes, they are dehumanized by bored teenagers and illegal, often American settlers with guns. even attacked in or prevented from entering their religious buildings to worship. And yet, despite persistent attacks and dehumanization, everyone we met, Christian and Muslim, advocated active and creative, non-violent resistance, determined to retain their humanity by not hating. We returned 3 days before Israel started bombing Iran. It used this as an excuse to annex the West Bank, locking barriers across the roads and trapping Palestinians in their towns, unable to travel to work or back home. It is our duty to stand in solidarity with them and to act. Free Palestine. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Esther. That was informative and heavy. And, you know, those last paragraphs that you were sharing around non-violent resistance, just ridiculously inspiring, actually. Thank you so much. We're going to have a time of questions now. If you want to put your questions in the chat, please do. Or if you want to raise your hand virtually, which you can do along the bottom of the screen. I think it's in the React, along a menu across the bottom. Please do raise your hand if you want to ask Esther a question. Now, I need to check the chat in case there are any questions already in there. Okay, does anybody have a question? John, thank you. Go ahead. You need to take yourself off mute.
Thanks, Claire, and thank you, Esther, for that. I think many of us who are on this call are familiar with many of the places you've been speaking of. I wanted really to ask about the murder that took place on Tuesday of Ada Hathaleen. I think you probably didn't visit O'Hare when you were in Hebron, but O'Hare is in the South Hebron Hills. And some of the human rights defenders who are based within Hebron link into O'Hare. And Ada was one of the human rights defenders from Hebron. He was a friend of Isa as well. With the outright murder of non-violent human rights defenders, I wonder how you felt the morale was of people such as Isa in the light of the fact that whereas a few months, years ago, on the whole, they were being arrested, they're now being shot.
Yeah, thanks, John, for that question. Definitely, everybody told us that, yes, since October 2023, things are much worse. They were always at risk of arrest, and as you say, they're now at risk of being shot by armed settlers. So things are more precarious for them. There were various places where it felt very tense, and we could feel the tension of our hosts and clearly how at risk they were, just in taking us to some of the places they took us to. In addition to that, we met Muntha Isaac at his installation at the church in Ramallah, where he's moved from Bethlehem. And he was saying to us, we don't talk about hope anymore. We are in despair. You know, we've been crying out to the international community, not just the last, year and a half, nearly 2 years, since the siege on Gaza, but for decades. And yet things are just getting worse and worse and worse. So there is a lot of despair. And yeah, they are not talking about hope. Isa was quite buoyant when we saw him, very determined, and lively. And as I said, Omar has been, bringing these delegations every month, feeling that they are needed more than ever. But since we came back and Israel started bombing Iran and they locked down the West Bank, they haven't been able to do any more delegations as yet. But they do feel like it's really important that they happen, that they experience less violence when there are international visitors. But as you've said, even human rights activists now are being killed. Not that this is the first time. Obviously, this happened with Rachel Corrie, some time ago. But we're not immune either. The situation is very, very tense.
Thank you, Esther. Virginia, can I bring you in to ask your question, please?
I'll unmute. Yeah, thank you very much, Esther. It's absolutely horrifying listening to you. I mean, one knows what's in theory, but when you just mention all those things. But my question is, what can we do about it, obviously? And okay, one can send money and things like that, but it seems to me that really the United States has to be stopped sending support and money and whatnot. And I did read, I think in the Irish Times the other day, about a big meeting of what they called left halakhic Jews in maybe New York. So there does seem to be a Jewish movement saying this is not what we understand to be the Jewish faith, and we want justice and mercy and recognition. Do you know about that? And is there any way we can support them and help them widen that movement in America?
So, first of all, what can we do? BDS is vitally important. There are lots of Palestinians and with South Africans who believe that it was boycott, divestment and sanctions that ended apartheid in South Africa and is vitally important for ending apartheid in Palestine.
Sorry, what does BDS stand for?
Boycott, divestment and sanctions. So that's the first thing, not buying goods from illegal Israeli settlements. We need to keep pressuring our governments for
the
a full
Irish
embargo and arms and trade embargo on Israel. And we need to pressure the Israeli government to do the same. So we do have to keep writing to politicians, and we have to keep coming out in our numbers and demonstrating on the streets so that they know we are here and they know we're not going away, and they know we want change, even though they keep sending us, hopeless messages in response. We have to keep doing it. There is some shift even in our government, with Keir Starmer making that nonsense statement this week that he would recognise Palestinian state unless Israel has a ceasefire. So, but the fact that he's saying anything like that at all shows he's being pressured, and he's being pressured by MPs, and MPs are being pressured by the public. So BDS, and there's a BDS website where you can find out more information and find out, which products you should not be buying. And then keeping pressuring MPs, keeping turning out on marches. In terms of the Jewish community, the Jewish community is out on these marches every week, so you can get in touch with them. There's NAMOD in the UK, is the British Jews against the apartheid. There's Jews for Peace in America, so you can find these communities online, get in touch with them.
Sorry, what was the English one?
It's called NAMOD. It's NA_AMOD.
AMOD. N for nobody.
Yes, yeah. N
in the chat.
We'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Because in Israel, there's very little support that isn't for the government and what the government's doing. There was a recent report that 82% of Israeli citizens said they want to see Gaza completely wiped out. And the illegal settlers are, in many cases, even more rabid, entitled, violent than the Israeli citizens who've been there longer. So unless Israel becomes a pariah state through sanctions, it's not going to change its course of action, because although there are protests in Israel, they're very small compared to the whole population. So, you know, we essentially need the ICJ to act, and the ICC. You know, they've come out with various rulings, but they've not acted on them as yet. So we do have to keep signing letters, putting pressure on where we can, and amplify Palestinian voices. For anybody who's on social media, amplify Palestinian voices, because they are telling us that's what's keeping them alive. So, you know, Issa Amro tells us now, when he writes a piece for The Guardian, it gets published in days. That never used to happen. So if you're on social media, make sure you are sharing. You know, there are journalists in Gaza, Palestinian journalists in Gaza, who are also starving whilst trying to report what's happening there. Share their stories, share their work, wherever you can.
Tell me, have you come across the name Ronit Lenton? She's an Israeli-Irish woman. I came across material of hers online, which is quite almost hysterically anti-Israel. She refers to Israel as the Zionist entity. Have you been in touch with her at all?
No, I've not been in touch with her, but last week I was at a peace building summit and I met Lisa Loden.
Yeah.
Lisa Loden is also an Jewish Israeli citizen. She moved there in the 70s with her husband, but she has spent her life there trying to build peace building campaigns. And she no longer refers to herself as a Messianic Jew, because she feels that has now become too tainted with Zionism. So she's doing a lot of peace building work, trying to do peace building work amongst the Jewish community. But she says it is very, very hard.
And where she's located in
She's
Israel,
in Israel,
Palestine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Denise, can I bring you in to ask your question, please?
Hi, thank you so much for all of that information and for all the work you're doing. I just wanted to, I put in the chat that there's an app that you can use, the Boycat app, that's really helpful for boycotting. I guess I'm just asking, I have a friend who's a protest photographer who said that in all his years of photographing, this is the only movement that seems to be gaining traction, that it's getting bigger and bigger. And is that being seen by the Palestinians, that can they at least feel like they are supported in a way that maybe they weren't before? And how do we, because I am on social media now, but if you're not on social media, I know it can feel like you're very far away from being able to let them know that. And it can also on social media be quite overwhelming. I get a lot of messages from families with pictures of their children, and I can't help everyone. So it's like choosing, it's like triage. It's just awful. But is there a sense when you speak to people in Palestine that they feel that there is a movement for them?
Yeah, thanks, Denise. Important question. Yeah, absolutely. So people in Palestine are saying they see the marches. So these are being filmed and photographed, and this is being sent to them. They are getting access to this, and they're saying that does give them strength, that seeing the solidarity around the world is vitally important to them, which again is another reason why we need to keep going on these demonstrations. We need to be out in public, out in our numbers. And these are, while we were there, we were able to tell them these are the most consistent and the biggest demonstrations we have ever seen for any cause, that we're turning out week after week after week. And so they do see these images. It does give them a sense of strength. They do see the solidarity. There is graffiti in Gaza about the demonstrations that are happening around the world, about the student encampments, in America, about South Africa going to the ICJ, things like this. So they are receiving images from people at these marches, and that is giving them strength, and they do value that solidarity. It is really important.
And just one other thing that I had someone ask me the other night, what do we do when it's all over? And because now there's a liberal Zionism that is coming out in support of the end of starving children. That seems to be the red line, but they're still discussing how Israel, because the occupation is the thing we're trying to end, right? But how it just all feels very, very overwhelming. Even in Ireland, they enacted the Occupied Territories Bill, but only to include goods, not services. And we are the biggest importer, second biggest importer of Israeli services, goods and services in the world. So I think they have enacted the services part now, but even the sanctions have to be at their height, because they kind of have watered down sanctions too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the sanctions need to be elevated, and yeah, ceasefire is not the end. So because of pictures of starving children, more people are now against the starvation, but that's essentially all they're against, and that's not enough. So calling for a ceasefire is not enough. We absolutely need a ceasefire, but that is only the first step. And a ceasefire doesn't end the genocide. Genocide is about the destruction of the means of living, and a ceasefire will not stop the fact that there is not enough food, there is not enough water, there are no hospitals, there's no medicine.
But even if food gets in now, my sister is a
Yeah,
surgeon and says that their organs, half the people,
exactly.
even with
Yeah.
food now. So we
Yeah.
are about to witness.
People are still going to be dying for, we don't know how long after this. And even people who survive will have damaged organs for the rest of their life. This will affect for people who survive, this will affect the rest of their life. That damage is permanent. It can't be undone. There are more child amputees in Gaza per capita than anywhere else in the world. Many of them don't have any parents anymore either. There is going to be so much trauma that there's going to need to be so much work on trauma recovery, but also rebuilding. Like, international governments around the world are going to need to support the rebuilding of Gaza, the rebuilding of education, the rebuilding of hospitals, and huge amounts of trauma recovery. But even all of that is not liberation for Palestinians if they're still in an open air prison. So even all of that is not the end. And we have to keep putting pressure on and keep fighting and keep up sanctions until Palestinians actually have the right to self-determination.
Thank you, Esther. We've got a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to read the first one to you. Can you say something more about how Palestinians keep their faith, their Christian theology, after they appear to have been abandoned by the Church of England, amongst other church groups, and by the wider world, and perhaps they sometimes must feel by God himself? And that's a question from Jilly.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is, again, just a huge source of strength, or samud, steadfastness, as they refer to it, that they did say to us repeatedly, like, where is the church? Where is the church? Even if Christians around the world don't care about Palestinians in general, which they should, but even if they don't even seem to care about Christian Palestinians, or the fact that this is the birthplace of Christianity. They can stand around at Christmas and sing "O Little Town of Bethlehem" and not care that the Palestinians in Bethlehem are prevented from going to their own places of worship at Christmas time, Easter time, and that they are being kept in this apartheid state and don't have rights of freedom of movement, rights to water, to land, to security. And yet the churches have been relatively silent. And yet all the Christians we met told us they are committed to non-violent action as part of their Christian faith. But they read the Bible very differently from Christians here. They read the Bible as a view to going and acting. So they don't spend a long time sitting around in prayer meetings and talking about what passages might mean. They read a story and say, what does this mean for us on the ground? Now get out there and act. So it's all about action to resist and to move them towards liberation. But yeah, but they cannot understand the silence of the global church. They are despairing. And the World Council of Churches has recently, come out with a statement, but it's taken a very, very long time. Justin Welby was on the cusp of changing his attitude towards Palestine slightly when he was forced to resign for other reasons. And now we're waiting for another Archbishop of the Church of England. So some bishops have been a bit better. Rachel Treweek was the first to use the term apartheid. But at General Synod a couple of weeks ago, they refused to debate the Carlisle motion, which would have forced the church to think seriously about BDS. But hopefully that motion will come to Synod in February.
Thank you. Okay, a couple more questions. Katri, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, says, thank you for the information, Esther. It's so moving. After leaving and returning home, what impacted you the most? Oh, I've got a thing in the way that's stopping me from being able to read the rest of that. Hang on. Thank you for the information. So moving. After leaving and returning home, now what impacted you the most and you feel is the most important for us to share with others?
Well, difficult question. I mean, what impacted me the most was the attitude of Palestinians, and perhaps this is the important thing to share. So, in theory, people know about the apartheid, the oppression, but obviously experiencing that gives you more detail. Just seeing the scale of the wall, how difficult journeys are, those sorts of things. But yeah, really what impacted me most was the attitude of Palestinians that even when all this is happening to them, and even when they have to be submissive to these teenagers with automatic rifles on, every street corner, that actually their response is essentially still one of love. What they were saying to us is it's an act of love to prevent Israelis from perpetrating this oppression against the Palestinians. This is dehumanizing them as well as dehumanizing us. And the fact that they see retaining their humanity as being about reaching out and wanting reconciliation, wanting justice, but wanting peace. That despite everything that's happening to them, they're not reacting violently. They're not wanting to be violent. And they really do want to live together in peace, but it has to be a just peace.
Wow, that's messing with my head. Wow, thank you. A couple more questions in the chat and then I'll come to you afterwards, Siham. Any suggestions to get our governments to stop this slaughter? This is from Barbara. She's saying, I'm from the US and was in a delegation 1 year ago. And I think maybe you've already covered this a little bit in terms of BDS and things, but any other suggestions?
Yeah, in terms of government specifically, I think mass civil disobedience, like we need to mobilize en masse. Although I'm saying that, the demonstrations have been really consistent and they've been, greater in numbers than in previous years, but it's still a small proportion of the population. And when we look at what Palestinians are facing, when people say to me, I'm scared to speak out in my workplace because I might upset my boss or it might affect my career, this is absolutely nothing compared to what Palestinians are facing. And if people are not prepared to speak out against a genocide, I don't know what their red line is. So if we have to stand up and we have to speak out and we need mass mobilization. So speak to everybody you meet and try and persuade everybody you meet to be part of this movement of mass mobilization for the Palestinian people.
Thank you. Agreed. Chris asks, how can theologians be more engaged with what's happening? And in the 40th anniversary of the Kairos document in South Africa, what might be the most effective contribution theologians can or could make?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, yeah, good question. There are lots of resources on Christian Zionism and on unpacking those myths about Christian Zionism. So, obviously, there are very fundamental Christian Zionists, and you will probably never change their mind. But there is a huge proportion of the Christian population that has a much looser form of Christian Zionism, where they just feel like they ought to have some affinity with Israel, the state of Israel, because it says Israel in the Bible. But what they're doing there is conflating the current nation state of Israel with Israel in the Bible, which means something quite different. And the name Israel, when the state of Israel was formed in 1948, it chose the name Israel because it couldn't choose the name Palestine because it was already called Palestine. So it chose the name Israel because Israel was in the Bible. It chose a term from the Bible. And yet Christians now seem to think, oh, we have to support the state of Israel because it says Israel in the Bible, as if somehow the state of Israel is connected with that Israel in the Bible, but it's not. It chose that term for a specific reason, and it's now using that to garner this support. So there's more of a kind of, Christians feel this kind of vague connection and feel like they should support the state of Israel, but Christians should not believe that what God intended is for people to be oppressed and people to be displaced from their land. That cannot be justice, and that cannot be a form of theology that we support. So yes, I would say, again, talk to Christians that talk to people in your churches and dispel some of these myths. Find out what they think the connection is between the state of Israel and Israel in the Bible, and talk to them about justice, talk to them about human rights. And we need to, theologians can do more to unpick readings of the Bible that we've always read in a certain way, and maybe actually we're locked into that reading and we don't realize that actually that reading is a reading coming from the position of colonizers and coming from the position of empire, and yet the Bible is really about resistance to empire. So some of the examples from Palestinians, for example, are reading the parable of the seeds and then thinking about the way in which seeds that fall on different sorts of ground, that doesn't mean that that's bad ground. It doesn't mean there's good soil and there's bad soil. That actually they know very well different plants grow in different sorts of ground. The olive trees grow where it's stony and dry, and yet when the Israeli settlers come along and demolish their villages and plant pine trees, those pine trees, because they're not indigenous, they cause problems for the land and end up starting fires. And when those fires burn all those pine trees, the olive trees come back because that is the right territory for olive trees. So, and these are readings that we've not thought about from our perspective because we've always read it a certain way. So we need to be open to thinking, actually, there are alternative readings here. And maybe this passage isn't saying what we think it says. So read Palestinian theology, and then have those conversations.
Thank you. Siham, can I bring you in to ask your question, please? I hope I've pronounced your name okay. If I've got it wrong, you've got your hand raised, Siham.
I'll just add while we're waiting for Siham, if we think also about the parable of the talents, and the master giving the money to various slaves and sending them off, or servants, and sending them off to go and make more money. And the way we normally read that story is that the one who buried that money in the ground and didn't make any more money, and then returned it to the master and said, here you are, I'm giving back to you what is yours. And the master said, oh, you useless, worthless servant, and cast him out because he hadn't made any more money. We tend to be told that story as a version of don't be lazy, work hard, kind of Protestant work ethic, when actually an alternative reading of that story is that this is someone who is resisting capitalism, is resisting the economy of the empire. This person who's buried the money in the ground and said to the master, here you go, I'm giving you back what's yours, is saying, I'm not going to work for you. I'm not going to be your slave and make money for you. So this is resisting empire.
I've just found another question in the chat, so I'm going to ask that one, and then I'll come back to Siham and Hilary as well, who you've got your hand raised. Jilly says, I really struggle with friends, including Christian friends, who say nothing and do nothing about what is happening. Do you have any advice on that? I know others who are active in the protests, etc., who are struggling with this issue of silent friends too. With some of them, I have confronted them on their silence, but despite these conversations, they return again to their silence.
Yeah, that's really difficult. I think you have to keep confronting them, and confronting them on, you know, terms that are indisputable. So if you say to your friends, do you think genocide is okay? You know, do you think Jesus weeps for Gaza? You know, these sorts of questions that, you know, so you don't have to get into any nitty-gritty. You don't have to get into the argument about, should we have a two-state solution, or should we have some other solution, or, you know, what's the solution? That's not for us to decide. All we have to know right now is that Palestinian human rights are being violated. And that's all we need to be asking people who are not speaking out. Do you not think you have a duty to stand up for human rights? Yeah. And anyone who says, oh, it's complicated, oh, it's political, we don't know what the solution is, those are diversions, distracting from the conversation. We don't need to get into all of that to just get to that starting point. And so the starting point is, don't you think you should stand up for human rights? And as a Christian, don't you think you should stand up for human rights? At the very least, for the human rights of the Christians in Palestine who are suffering.
Thank you. Siham, are you there to ask your question? Okay, let's move to you, Hilary, please, if you're happy to ask yours.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thank you, Esther. I think really you've just answered my question with your remarks just then, because my question was about this whole thing of a two-state solution that's being bandied around so much particularly by Western politicians at the moment, that just seems to bear no connection with reality on the ground. But thank you for what you've just said, because you were just saying that actually it's not the question for us to be asking at the moment, because resistance now is really about human rights and genocide and justice. So I don't know if you want to say any more on that, but
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Hilary. Yeah, I mean, I will also say that everybody we met told us the two-state solution is dead. The two-state solution has meant decades of land grab by the Israeli government. So attempts at the two-state solution have not given Palestinians their rights. The Israeli government does not respect those what were supposed to be temporary borders, and has actually built this separation wall, this apartheid wall inside of those borders, and is building all these illegal settlements, so constantly taking more and more land. And yet Western governments keep parroting the language of two-state solution, because otherwise they have to accept that settler colonialism is the problem, and they don't want to go there. But actually, hardly anybody thinks a two-state solution now is going to work. And it needs to be one state where everybody has their human rights respected. But yeah, as I said, that's for, you know, when we've got like Keir Starmer going, well, I've come out with a European plan for the future of Israel and Palestine. And we've got Donald Trump going, well, I'm coming up with the American plan for the future of Israel and Palestine. None of this is respecting the Palestinian right to self-determination. Palestinians and Israelis need to come up with a plan, and Palestinians need to have the right to self-determination.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, I think we've got through all of the questions. Esther, like, I'm a bit in awe of you at your ability to be able to respond to all the questions that have come up and to share so articulately with us. Thank you so much. I'm sure that everyone else in the room, in the Zoom call today, agrees with me and wants to say a huge thank you to you for your insight, your wisdom, your experiences that you've shared with us. Yeah, we're so grateful to you. Thank you very much. Just before we close, I just wanted to share about a couple of things. Firstly, if you're not aware of who Sabeel-Kairos is, please do check us out. I have put a link to our website in the chat for how you can become more involved with the work we do. We're basically a campaigning charity. We're a Christian campaigning charity here in the United Kingdom. We partner with Sabeel in Jerusalem and Kairos, Palestine. And we're all about advocating for the human rights of Palestinians. We amplify the voices of Palestinian Christians, and as much as possible, we try and get their message out into the UK churches and advocate for them. So if you don't know us, please do check us out. And as well as that, we are having a conference in October. We're having a day conference down in London, and we'd love to invite you all to join us. There's also a link in the chat to look at getting tickets for that. We've got 2 Palestinians coming over to the UK. They're going to be with us for over a week, actually, and we've got different speaking engagements for them to do during that time, meeting with Parliament and other people along the line. But we've got them on Saturday, the 17th of October. It's Sahar Francis, who works for Adamir, and she's a Palestinian human rights lawyer, and also Reverend Ashraf Tanus, and he's the Lutheran pastor at Bet Sahur Church. And we're really, really looking forward to hearing from them both, learning from them. We're going to have talks on the day, we're going to have panels, and also then in the afternoon we're going to have the chance to be outside in public and do some kind of public witness, which we're still in the throes of planning at the moment. So please do join us. We're advertising that on our website and on our social media, and there's a link in the chat as well to tickets. We'd love to have as many people as possible. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, it's Friday, not Saturday. Thank you so much to Charlotte and Lynn. I just got the day wrong. Friday the 17th, not Saturday the 17th of October. Yeah, hope you'll join us. Thank you so much again, Esther. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us this evening. It's been a really, really good and informative time. Thank you all. Did you want to say anything else, Esther, just before we close?
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you, everybody, for your questions. I've just realised I didn't quite answer the question, or I could have said more about the Kairos document. And the South African Kairos document was mentioned. So I'll just give a plug to the Palestine Kairos document that was written in 2009. In case you haven't spotted that, you can Google that, you'll find it. But also to say that 2009 Kairos Palestine document was reaching out for help and support from churches around the world. And now Palestinians feel like they haven't received that. So a new Kairos Palestine document, Kairos Palestine 2, is going to be coming out in November. And that's likely to be calling more for sanctions and boycotting of churches who are either complicit, supporting the state of Israel in its actions, or are just silent. So do watch out for that Kairos Palestine 2 document, and there'll be more actions for you and your churches there. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.